The screen flickered on at 2:47 a.m. Yoon-gi-yeol froze. The warehouse camera showed a woman tied to a metal chair, her head slumped forward, hair stuck to her face with sweat and blood. The zip ties around her wrists were cutting deep. 3 men circled her slowly, taking turns stepping into frame like they wanted the camera to see what they were about to do. His secretary, alive, barely. One of the men grabbed her chin and yanked her head up. Even without sound, Yoon-gi-yeol could see her mouth form his name. Something inside him snapped. "Lock down the city," he said, already standing. "Every exit, every road." His men didn't ask questions. They saw his face. By the time the engine roared to life, Yoon-gi-yeol was already loading a gun. Hands steady, eyes empty. He rewound the footage once, just once, watching her flinch when a fist came too close. That was all it took. Across the city, the warehouse lights suddenly went dark, and the men inside had no idea that the last thing they'd ever done was touch someone who belonged to the most dangerous man in Seoul. Before we go any further, if you're still here after that, you're already part of this story. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because this one is about to get intense. And if you love stories where danger meets loyalty, where one decision changes everything, subscribe now. Yoon-gi-yeol never checked security footage at 3 in the morning, but tonight his gut told him something was wrong. The screen flickered to life, and what he saw made every muscle in his body lock up like iron. His rivals had Olivia. So hey, before we get into this wild ride, you're going to want to stick around because what happens next, nobody sees coming. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m., and there she was in that abandoned warehouse on the east side, tied to a chair with her head hanging forward. Yoon-gi-yeol's hand gripped the edge of his desk so hard the wood creaked under his fingers. 3 men circled her, and even though the camera had no sound, he could see her shoulders shaking. She was scared, and that fact alone made something dangerous wake up inside his chest. "Get every available man," he said to his second-in-command without looking away from the screen. "Right now." Within 15 minutes, they'd mobilized. Yoon-gi-yeol didn't speak during the drive, and his crew knew better than to ask questions when he got like this. The thing was, Olivia wasn't supposed to matter this much. She'd been his secretary for 8 months, efficient and smart, always 3 steps ahead of whatever he needed. She made his coffee exactly right, organized his chaos, and sometimes when she smiled at him over her desk, he forgot what he was supposed to be doing. But this was different. They hit the warehouse hard and fast, and Yoon-gi-yeol went in first despite his men's protests. The rivals scattered like roaches when the lights came on, disappearing through back exits before anyone could grab them. Probably for the best, he thought, because if he got his hands on them right then... Olivia lifted her head when she heard footsteps, and her eyes went wide when she recognized him. "Sir, Her voice cracked and she stopped talking. "Don't," Yoon-gi-yeol said quietly, already working on the ropes around her wrists. "Just don't talk yet." Her hands were shaking when he freed them, and without thinking, he caught them in his own to steady them. They were cold, too cold, and she had marks on her arms where they'd grabbed her. No serious injuries that he could see, but the fear in her eyes was enough to make his jaw clench. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded, but when she tried to stand, her legs gave out. Yoon-gi-yeol caught her before she could fall, one arm around her waist, solid and sure. For maybe 3 seconds they just stood there, her leaning against him, his heart doing something weird in his chest that he didn't want to examine too closely. "Sorry," she whispered. It's been a long night." "Yeah," he said, and his voice came out rougher than he meant it to. "Let's get you out of here." He helped her to the car, and she didn't let go of his arm the whole way. His men pretended not to notice, and Yoon-gi-yeol was grateful for that much at least. In the back seat, Olivia sat pressed against the door, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. "How did you know where I was?" she asked after a while. Yoon-gi-yeol glanced at her, then back at the road ahead. "Checked the CCTV when you didn't answer your phone. Tracked your location from there." You check security footage at 3 a.m.? When my people are missing, yeah. The word people felt wrong, but he didn't know what else to call her. Employee? That wasn't right either, not anymore. Not after tonight. She was quiet for a long moment and then said very softly, "Thank you." He wanted to tell her she didn't need to thank him, that of course he came for her, that the thought of something happening to her made him feel like he was losing his mind. Instead, he just nodded and kept his eyes forward. Back at his penthouse, Yoon-gyeol's housekeeper, Mrs. Choi, fussed over Olivia like she was a long-lost daughter. She made tea, found clean clothes, drew a hot bath, and shooed Yoon-gyeol away when he tried to hover. He paced in his office for an hour, replaying that security footage in his head, seeing her scared face over and over until he wanted to put his fist through something. When Mrs. Choi finally left around 5 a.m., the apartment fell quiet except for the city sounds filtering through the windows. Yoon-gyeol found Olivia curled up on his couch, drowning in one of his old university hoodies, looking tiny and lost. She had a mug of tea cradled in both hands, but she wasn't drinking it. "You should rest," he said from the doorway. She looked up at him, and something in her expression made his chest tight. "I keep thinking about what they said. That you'd come for me because I'm—" She stopped, bit her lip. "They wanted to use me as bait." Yoon-gyeol moved into the room, sat down on the opposite end of the couch, not too close, but close enough. "They're not wrong. I did come for you." "But why?" Her voice cracked on the question. "I'm just your secretary. You could have sent anyone. You didn't have to—" "Olivia." He said her name carefully, like it was something precious. "You're not just anything." She stared at him, and he watched about 17 different emotions cross her face. "I don't understand." Honestly, neither did he. Yoon-gyeol had built his life on being untouchable, on not letting anyone get close enough to be used against him. His world was dangerous, complicated, full of people who'd knife you in the back as soon as look at you. Caring about someone was a weakness he couldn't afford. But here they were. "Look," he said, running a hand through his hair, "I know this whole situation is complicated, and I know you probably want to quit. Find somewhere safer to work, and I wouldn't blame you, but—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I'd really like it if you stayed." "Stayed as your secretary, stayed in my life." The words came out before he could stop them. And yeah, okay, that was definitely more honest than he'd planned on being. Olivia set down her tea mug with shaky hands. "Mr. Kwon." "Yoon-gyeol," he interrupted. "If we're doing this, you should probably call me Yoon-gyeol." "This?" she echoed. "What's this?" Good question. He didn't have a good answer, not yet. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know that when I saw you on that camera tonight, He stopped, jaw working. "I've never been that scared in my entire life, and I've been in a lot of scary situations." She wrapped her arms around herself again, that same self-protective gesture from earlier. "I'm scared too, not just because of tonight, but because I like working for you. I like being around you, probably more than I should, and now everything's different, and I don't know what happens next." Yoon-gyeol felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been wound tight for months without him even realizing it. "Maybe we figure it out together," he suggested quietly. "One day at a time." "One day at a time," she repeated. And finally, she smiled. It was small and uncertain, but it was there. The sun was starting to come up over Seoul, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, not touching but not alone either, and for the first time in a very long time, Yoon-gyeol let himself hope that maybe, possibly, he could have something good in his life, something worth protecting. 3 weeks passed before Olivia came back to work and Yoon-gyeol didn't push. He had security posted at her apartment building, made sure someone checked on her every day, and maybe sent more food deliveries than was strictly necessary. His men gave him weird looks, but nobody said anything because, Well, he was still their boss and they valued their jobs. When she finally walked back into the office, Yoon-gil looked up from his paperwork and forgot how to breathe for a second. She'd cut her hair shorter, just above her shoulders, and she looked determined. Nervous, but determined. "I'm ready to come back," she announced, "if you'll still have me." "My office has been a disaster without you," he said, which was true. "Mrs. Han from accounting tried to reorganize my files and I still can't find anything." That made her laugh, and the sound did something warm and uncomfortable to his insides. "Well, we can't have that," she said, setting her bag down at her desk. "Where should I start?" They fell back into their routine, but it wasn't quite the same as before. There were moments now, small ones, where their hands would brush when passing documents and neither of them would pull away immediately. Times when he'd catch her looking at him with this expression he couldn't quite read. Instances where he'd find excuses to walk past her desk just to... What? See her? Check that she was really there and safe? Yeah, he had it bad. 2 months after the warehouse incident, Yoon-gil had a meeting that ran late and he found Olivia still at her desk at 8 p.m., frowning at her computer screen. "You should go home," he said, leaning against her doorframe. She jumped, hand flying to her chest. "You scared me." "Sorry." He wasn't, actually, but it seemed like the thing to say. "What are you still doing here?" "Trying to organize the schedules for next month. You have 3 meetings booked at the same time on the 15th. Cancel 2 of them." "Which 2? Yoon-gil thought about it. "The boring ones." She gave him a look, the one that said she thought he was being ridiculous, but also kind of funny. "They're all going to be boring. That's what business meetings are." "Exactly, so it doesn't matter which ones I miss." He pushed off the door frame, moved closer to her desk. "Have you eaten?" "I had a sandwich at lunch." "That was 7 hours ago. Come on, I know a place." She looked uncertain. Are we... "It's dinner, Olivia. Between 2 people who both need to eat. Don't overthink it." Except she was right to overthink it, because the place Yoon-gil took her to was definitely, absolutely a date spot. Small and intimate, with low lighting and good food, the kind of restaurant where couples went to celebrate anniversaries. His favorite table in the back corner was available because the owner, Mr. Park, always kept it free for him. "This is nice," Olivia said, looking around with wide eyes. "Really nice. Do you come here a lot?" "Sometimes, when I need to think." Or when he needed to get away from the weight of his responsibilities, the constant pressure of running an organization that operated in the gray spaces between legal and not quite legal. They ordered, and while they waited, Yoon-gil found himself talking about things he never talked about. His childhood, growing up in Busan before his family moved to Seoul, how he'd gotten into this life almost by accident, helping out his uncle with what he thought were legitimate business deals until he was in too deep to walk away. The choices he'd made that led him here, to this moment, sitting across from a woman who made him want to be different, maybe. Olivia listened without judging, her chin propped on her hand, eyes never leaving his face. When he finally ran out of words, she was quiet for a long moment. "That must have been really hard," she said eventually, "not having a choice about the life you wanted." "We always have choices," Yoon-gil replied. "I just made the ones that kept my family safe, kept food on the table. Sometimes that's all you can do." "And now?" "Now." He hesitated, turning his water glass in circles on the table. "Now I'm trying to figure out what I want, not what I need." Her eyes softened and, yeah, she understood what he wasn't quite saying. "For what it's worth, I think you're a good person trying to do his best in a complicated situation. You don't know everything I've done. Maybe not, but I know you came for me when I was in trouble. I know you make sure your people are taken care of. I know you work 16-hour days because you don't trust anyone else to handle the important stuff." She paused. "And I know that when you smile, really smile, it changes your whole face." Yoon-gil felt his ears get hot and he looked away. "I don't smile that often." "You should. It's a good look on you." Their food arrived and they ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about growing up in Johannesburg, about her family's restaurant where she'd learned to cook alongside her grandmother, about moving to Seoul 3 years ago for a fresh start after a relationship went wrong, how she'd stumbled into the secretary position almost by luck, answering an ad without really knowing who she'd be working for. "Were you scared when you found out?" Yoon-gyeol asked. "About what I do?" "Terrified," she admitted, "but also curious, I guess. You're not what I expected. None of this is." "What did you expect?" She smiled a little. "Someone colder, probably. More, I don't know, dramatic. But you're just you. You drink too much coffee, you hate paperwork, you remember everyone's birthday, and you always say thank you when I do things for you, even though that's literally my job. Those things matter," he said quietly. "The small things. My father taught me that before he died. Treat people with respect and they'll respect you back. Or at least they'll think twice before betraying you." Cynical. Realistic. But he was smiling when he said it. After that dinner, something shifted between them. Not dramatically, not all at once, but like ice slowly melting in spring. Yoon-gyeol started finding excuses to see her outside of work, suggesting coffee breaks that turned into long walks through the city. Olivia would text him funny observations about their co-workers, and he'd find himself grinning at his phone like a teenager. One Saturday, he showed up at her apartment with takeout from that restaurant she'd mentioned missing from back home. He'd had to call in 3 favors and pay through the nose for ingredients. But the look on her face when she opened the door and saw the familiar containers made it worth every penny. "How did you—" She stared at him, then at the food, then back at him. "Yoon-gyeol, this is from Johannesburg. How did you get this?" He shrugged, suddenly feeling awkward standing in her doorway with bags of food. "I know people who know people. Can I come in, or are we eating in the hallway?" She stepped back quickly, gesturing him inside. Her apartment was small but cozy, full of bright colors and photos and things that made it feel lived in and warm, so different from his sterile penthouse with its modern furniture and lack of personality. They ate sitting on her living room floor because her table was currently covered in paperwork from a class she was taking. "Online business management," she explained when he asked. "Figured I should probably have some actual qualifications for this job beyond making good coffee and putting up with you." "You do more than that." "Yeah, well, still." She picked at her food, not quite meeting his eyes. I don't want you to think I'm only useful for secretary stuff, if that makes sense." It made more sense than she probably realized. Yoon-gyeol set down his fork, giving her his full attention. "Olivia, you're the smartest person I know. You've basically been running my organization for months without anyone realizing it because you make it look easy. The fact that you don't have a fancy degree doesn't change that." She looked up at him then, something vulnerable in her expression. "You really think that?" "I know it." He leaned back against her couch, stretching his legs out. "Why do you think I panic whenever you take a day off? Nothing works without you." "That's probably not healthy, organizationally speaking." "Probably not," he agreed, "but I've got bigger problems to worry about than organizational health." They talked late into the night, and somewhere around midnight, Olivia started yawning. She tried to hide it, but Eun-gyeol noticed anyway, because he noticed everything about her now. The way she twisted her hair around her finger when she was thinking. How she always took her shoes off the second she got home. The fact that she kept her apartment slightly too warm because she was always cold. "I should go," he said, even though leaving was the last thing he wanted to do. "Let you get some sleep." "You could stay." The words came out rushed and she immediately looked flustered. "I mean, on the couch, if you want. It's late and I know you have security concerns and—" "Olivia." He said her name, gently, standing up. "That's probably not a good idea." Her face fell and he realized too late how that sounded. "No, wait, I don't mean—" He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with himself. "I want to stay, that's the problem. I want to stay and I want more than I should want. And you deserve better than me stumbling through this and messing it up." She stood too, close enough that he could smell her shampoo, something fruity and warm. "What if I don't want better? What if I just want you?" Yoon-gil's heart was doing that weird thing again where it forgot how to beat properly. "You don't know what you're saying." "I'm saying that I like you. A lot. And I'm tired of pretending I don't." She was looking right at him now, chin lifted in that determined way of hers. "I'm saying that, yeah, your life is complicated and probably dangerous and definitely not what I planned for myself, but you make me laugh and you make me feel safe, and when I'm with you, everything else just quiets down, I guess." He should leave. He should walk out that door right now before this went any further, before he let himself believe that maybe he could have this. But his feet weren't moving, and Olivia was still standing there, waiting for him to say something. Anything. "I can't promise you a normal life," he said finally. "I can't promise that things won't be complicated or scary sometimes. But I can promise that I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe, to make you happy, if you'll let me try." "That's all I'm asking for," she said softly. "Just try with me." So he stayed. They didn't do anything except talk and eventually fall asleep on opposite ends of her couch, but it felt monumental anyway, like crossing some invisible line that they couldn't uncross. When Yoon-gil woke up the next morning with a crick in his neck and Olivia curled up under a blanket on the other side of the couch, he felt something settle in his chest. This was what he wanted, her, them, whatever this was becoming. His phone buzzed with messages from his security team, probably wondering where he was, but Yoon-gil ignored them. For once in his life, work could wait. Right now, watching Olivia sleep with her hair falling across her face and her hand curled under her cheek, this was exactly where he needed to be. Dating while running a criminal organization turned out to be complicated in ways Yoon-gil hadn't anticipated. He couldn't just take Olivia anywhere without considering security risks, couldn't talk about his day without editing out the dangerous parts, couldn't introduce her to most of his associates because the less they knew about her, the safer she was. But they made it work. He took her to a private art gallery on a Tuesday afternoon when the place was closed to the public. The owner owed him a favor and was happy to let them wander through empty rooms full of paintings and sculptures. Olivia stood in front of a huge canvas covered in bold strokes of color and light, tilting her head like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "What do you think it means?" she asked. Yoon-gil had absolutely no idea. Art wasn't really his thing, but watching her enjoy it, that he could do all day. Maybe it doesn't mean anything. Maybe the artist just liked the colors. "That's the most emotionally avoidant art interpretation I've ever heard." "I'm emotionally avoidant about most things," he pointed out. "You knew that when you signed up for this." She turned to look at him, amusement dancing in her eyes. "Signed up for what exactly? You never actually asked me to be your girlfriend. We just sort of fell into this." He'd been thinking about that, actually. How to make this official without making it weird. "Olivia, would you—" "Don't." She held up a hand, stopping him. "Don't ask me in an empty art gallery because you feel obligated. Ask me when you really want to, when it feels right." Relief flooded through him because, yeah, she got it. She got him. "Okay," he said. "But for the record, I'm already thinking of you that way, as my girlfriend. If that's... Is that weird to say?" "Little bit," she admitted, "but also sweet, in your weird, emotionally avoidant way." They moved on to the next room and she slipped her hand into his like it was the most natural thing in the world. Yoon-gil laced their fingers together and tried not to think too hard about how right it felt. A week later, Olivia had a birthday, and Yoon-gil went slightly overboard. He couldn't help it. He'd been watching her drop hints for weeks about things she liked, places she wanted to go, and he'd filed every single comment away in his mental database. So when the day came, he picked her up at dawn and drove her 2 hours outside the city to a lavender farm she'd mentioned seeing online. You remembered? She said, staring out the window at the purple fields stretching toward the horizon. I remember everything you tell me. It came out more intense than he meant it to, but it was true. Every conversation, every small detail, he kept it all locked away like treasure. They spent the morning walking through the lavender, and Olivia took about 1,000 photos on her phone. Yoon Gaeul mostly took photos of her when she wasn't looking, trying to capture the way the sunlight caught in her hair, the pure joy on her face. At one point, she grabbed his hand and pulled him into the middle of a field, spinning around with her arms spread wide. Thank you for this, she said, a little breathless. This is perfect. It's just flowers. It's not just flowers. It's you paying attention. It's you caring enough to drive 2 hours because I mentioned something once. She stopped spinning, looking at him seriously. That matters. You matter. Yoon Gaeul felt his throat get tight and he had to look away before he did something embarrassing. Yeah, well, you matter too. Smooth, she teased, but she was smiling. For lunch, he'd arranged a picnic under one of the big trees at the edge of the property. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches and fruit and her favorite chocolate cake from the bakery near his office. They sat on a blanket and ate and talked about nothing important, and it was maybe the most relaxed Yoon Gaeul had felt in years. Can I ask you something? Olivia said after a while, picking at the edge of the blanket. And you have to be honest. Always. Do you ever regret it? Getting involved with me? I know it makes your life more complicated. Yoon Gaeul set down his water bottle and turned to face her fully. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. You don't complicate my life, Olivia. You make it make sense. She blinked rapidly, and yeah, maybe she was crying a little. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Then people haven't been paying attention. He reached over and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb, the gesture so natural he didn't even think about it. You're kind and smart and funny, and you make every room brighter just by being in it. Anyone who doesn't see that is an idiot. Including you? She asked, voice wobbly. Because you spent 8 months not seeing it. Yeah, well, I already admitted I was emotionally avoidant. Try to keep up. That made her laugh through her tears, and she shoved his shoulder lightly. You're impossible. But you like me anyway. Unfortunately, for both of us. Yeah, I really do. They stayed at the farm until sunset, not wanting the day to end. On the drive back to Seoul, Olivia fell asleep in the passenger seat with her head against the window. Yoon Gaeul kept glancing over at her. This woman who'd somehow crashed into his carefully controlled life and rearranged everything. His phone buzzed with work messages, but he ignored them. Whatever crisis was happening could wait until tomorrow. Right now, driving through the darkening countryside with Olivia beside him, he had everything he needed. Things were good for almost 3 months, and then the universe remembered that Yoon Gaeul's life wasn't allowed to be simple. It started with weird hang-up calls to Olivia's phone. Then someone tried to follow her home from the grocery store, backing off only when Yoon Gaeul's security team intervened. Small things that added up to big problems. Someone was sending a message and Yoon Gaeul was receiving it loud and clear. I want you to move in with me, he said one night over dinner at his place. Temporarily, just until we figure out who's targeting you. Olivia set down her fork slowly. Targeting me? Yoon Gaeul, what's going on? He'd been trying to shield her from the details, but maybe that was a mistake. She deserved to know what she was dealing with. There's a rival group making moves into our territory. They've been testing boundaries, seeing where we're weak, and they've figured out that you're... He trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. That I'm what? A weakness? She didn't sound hurt, just resigned. That... You're important to me, he corrected, which makes you a target. I know that's not fair, and I know this is exactly the kind of complication you were worried about, but I need to know you're safe. Please. She was quiet for a long time, pushing food around her plate. Finally, she looked up at him. Okay, but on one condition. Anything. Stop trying to protect me from the truth. I'm in this with you, which means I need to know what's actually happening. No more hiding the scary parts to keep me